Right, so today will be the first part, and I believe all of you have received your materials. And of course, this material will be updated and revised as we go along. And so, as I was mentioning, the format is I'll just share through the so-called uh, screen, and at any time, any one of you can always ask questions over the chat. And you can also unmute yourself at any time to ask questions directly if I fail to read the chat, yeah? As it is. Anytime, huh? Anytime. So, because a dialogue or conversation or questions would be better than just listening to my voice alone. All right. So, I intend this to be a bit more advanced than the usual as we have gone around. So, let's get straight to the point. And to the point, number one, we would like to focus on relationships, especially the spousal relationships to begin with. Right. So, let's take a look into the cases that we have today. Number one, we're going to look into Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. So Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, the two of them has been married for some time, So let us take a look into how we often read a chart as we do. Number one, of course, let's take a look into Tom Hanks' chart to start off with. And of course, what do we do when we plot a person's chart? The first thing we would identify is the day master, isn't it? So we always start off with the day master. So as we move on to the day master, we would identify that Tom Hanks is a Ting Fire. It's a Ting Fire day master. A Ting Fire day master born near noon time, near noon time, will be considered to be weak. And moreover, we do find that Ting Fire born during the day, especially surrounded by two Ping Fire rock wealth, would then be a point of contention, as it is. Right. So number one, we will see that this is Ting Fire born in the month of the summer. Therefore, it would be peak, born in the right season, and rooted. Therefore, it's rooted into the month. So we do find it's rooted. That is number one. And so we will consider the day master. Number one, we identify the strength. So we look into the strength of the day master as it is. So adequately, we are referring to a very strong day master. Secondly, as we then look on into the personality, the traits, and so on, we can then consider that the person has a Rockwell facade, and it has then what characteristics? Now, generally, we do see that as we consider the strength, then we may want to look into the person's facade, and we may also want to look into the person's structure. Now, in the first part, this is a graveyard. A graveyard is a bit unique because usually we consider the main chi to be the structure. But when it comes to graveyard, we have to take concern. Do we find that chi earth is protruded? Is it penetrated through to the stems? No. But what do we find penetrated through to the stems? We find that the yeast would not penetrated through the stems. So in this context, the structure will not be eating God. The structure will not be eating God. The structure will be indirect resource. And therefore, it has a rock wealth facade and it has a indirect resource structure, especially. So this applies only for graveyard branches. For graveyard branches, such as this. So very quickly, we run through to the day master. And of course, there's a lot of things that we have covered over the past. We'll look into the production, the destruction, we'll look into the relationships. And we can see here there are many things to be outlined, which we can find that the goat together with the ox results in a clash, and then the horse will then harm the goat. Therefore, these are some of the branches, the interaction of the branches that we can find. Now, sometimes as we go through reading the chart, it becomes something that is, to me, it is always chaotic. One of the things I tend to dislike or to avoid reading a chart is when somebody just say, please read my chart. And then that's it. Then pause. And it's like, expect the entire life to be revealed. So what we may want to consider is a specific question. If there is anything that is narrow, anything that is specific, then that would be uh, something we can go on. But of course, we run through all this usual stuff. Yes, horse and goat combines. Yes, fantastic. All right, now let's move on to the next one that we have done. What we have done, we have gone into the useful gods. The useful gods. So for the first important thing is the day master, the focal point. Then, of course, immediately we refer to the useful. Now, as we look into the useful gods, let's go straight to his chart at the bottom. So Tom Hanks' useful chart, of course, brings about. We can look into the schedule that was given. We have a Ting Fire born in the season. So Ting Fire born in season means summer. So summer means the temperature. The temperature will be hot. So this will be a hot chart, a warm chart. And so immediately rainwater will feature. And of course, we have metal, metal to break the earth because during summer the earth is dry and hard, and Jia to also weaken the earth. And therefore here we do find the earth is generally unfavorable if it is to the because what will happen to the earth? The earth will weaken the fire. Earth will weaken the fire. And so here we have Jia wood to feed the fire and come. So now here immediately we can identify that out of these three useful gods, one of them is void. One of them is void. And so the moment it is void, the moment it is void, it is something of a grave concern. And therefore, Jia is void. So immediately we may now have to pay attention to the luck cycle task. And for the luck cycle here, we can look for where the Jia wood will be. And do we find that in the life cycle there will be Jia around? Idea. All right. So therefore here we'll find that the Jia will feature prominently and Jia Chen is also quite a strong pillar. Quite a strong pillar. In a way, it also has something very similar to a Rockwell good Blake relationship. Therefore, that would be the pillar to which Tom Hanks must be tremendously to pay very strong attention to. And of course, right now it will be run water. Run water will be a feature useful god into this relationship here. And of course, the Keng metal will be in the relationship with here. Therefore, these are the pillars that we may have to focus on. All right. So anyway, we have gone through the useful god and we identify the useful gods and which god would then be particularly important to. So if that's the case, then we do find that if this is a strong Ting fire, then rock wealth will be quite unfavorable. And so what is favorable? So to identify what is favorable, of course, immediately we can see that the favorable will be Keng metal here. And we can then find rainwater. So rainwater would be. So how many rainwater? Only one. How many Keng? Also only one. Therefore, the rainwater and the Keng metal will be of course stuck in the depth and emptiness of the year. All right. So this will be number one, identifying Tom Hanks' chart. And now, of course, we have gone through. There will be always a lot of questions, a lot of things we can go through the earthly branches and elements and so on. And so let's just pause here for the time being, and now move back to the wife. Now the wife is Rita Wilson. So let's take a look into Rita Wilson's chart. So Rita Wilson's chart born in I just draw a line. Therefore now we can come to the chart. And by drawing the chart, we can now have the person. So once again, the first point is always the day master. So now we have a pink fire day master, lady, born in autumn. Therefore, the pink fire is weak. However, it is rooted on the day. And therefore here, number one, we find straight away the day master is pink fire, weak. And let's go straight to the point into looking into Rita's chart. And Rita's chart can be found here. And the useful god would then be Jia. And Shen. So therefore we have a Jia relation. So having the Jia wood and the Shen, then both the useful gods are present. So the useful gods will be the rainwater, and here we have the Jia. So the Jia is present. So that will be present. Right. And of course, as we move on to the luck pillar, so let's move on to the luck pillar, then we'll see that all the luck pillar would be present. All the luck pillar here would be present. Okay, so in the first part, of course, we see the rainwater appearing here in the pillar, and the wood also appears over to this side here as well. Over to this. All right, so now we have mapped out. Now we have mapped out the two persons which we have known to have been married for a long time, and to identify their natal chart, and now we can read along. Okay, so what do we know about, what do we already know about a spousal relationship? And so for the male, what do we know? We know that for the male, when we look for the spouses, the direct wealth, so the direct wealth and the indirect wealth, the wealth stars will be the spousal star. And so for the case of Tom Hanks, being a ting fire, what would be the spouse? What would be the spouse? So the spouse star will be the keng metal, will be the keng metal, will be metal, will be metal. So it will be metal. We can then consider that the stars that represents it will be metal, metal with the sinew and the shen. So this will be metal on the branches. And of course, metal here will be here. So these are the so-called keng metal, sin metal, shen and yu will be the metal star, the metals. And of course, here we also find the metal for it. So these are how we can map out into the spouse representation for the male. And for the female, what do we look for? For the female here, we have the fire. So this will be a fire. And for fire, we look into officer. So the officer will be 7 killing, or it will be your so-called direct officer, which is Kuei water. And so where do we find water? Where would be the water element? So the water element would be the Kuei water, Ren water, the Kuei water, Ren water element to be here as well. Isn't it? And then of course from it, we can also find that the water element would be your high, which is all quite late itself. All right, so we do find this to be the various point in time. Other than that, we also consider the Jia, which is a useful god, indirect resource. Okay, so this will be how we often would read the so-called stars for the spouses. For the male would be the wealth, and of course, for the female, the officer. Okay, then for the spouse palace, the branch beneath the day stem represents a spouse palace, reflecting the nature and the marriage itself. Now, when we consider marriage or wedding, we may also want to focus into what we call the true marital relationship. So very often we argue that the wedding is just a ceremony, basically a very long dinner or a lunch, but it is also primarily about the true marital relationship where cohabitation, registration, or any other bond that comes. So that's where the marriage date, we want to consider the activation of the house of the husband and the wife. Okay, so now here, let's move on to the step by step. And we want to outline, number one, whether it's an early marriage indicator or a delayed marriage indicator. So in the first part, the spouse star. If the spouse star appears in the year or month. Strong, no clash, no combination. If the spouse palace combines with the spouse star to form a harmonious relationship. Or the useful God appears to support the spouse palace. Therefore, here these are early marriage indicators. Early marriage. So in the early marriage indicators, we can consider, coming back for Tom Hanks, where is the spouse? So if we look into the part, we can see that the spouse star will be here. This is the spouse star. So this is the spouse star. Direct wealth, one. And it appears in the year. It appears in the year. Therefore, this would be somewhat considered to be an early wedding indicator. Wedding. And not just that, that is the useful God. So here we do find that the useful God is the Keng metal. The useful God is the Keng metal. So Keng metal is one of the useful gods. And so generally, when we consider that if the useful God is your spouse star, therefore it would then denote that marriage or a life partner would be auspicious. It would be good for this person to get married. So the person would say, how will it be? Therefore, it will be good. And there may be an indication that the marriage will be early. Marriage will be. But along the line, do we also find any other spouse stars? Can we find also any other spouse? We can also find another proxy to this. Yeah, that's right. Which is also here. And here, of course, would then be the spouse balance itself. Therefore, usually when we find a spouse star inside the spouse, therefore that would also be good. Therefore, here we find two spouses that we have as well. All right, move along. So, direct wealth in white, does it indicate the wife is exposed to illness? In a way, yes. Therefore, death and emptiness indicates that. So in a way, the useful God is in the death and emptiness, and it's also weak, so it's not very strong. So this would indicate that there's a possibly an early relationship, but it may not sustain, especially in the presence of your sin battle. Right. Therefore, that would be just looking into Tom Hanks' so-called natal. So when we look into the woman, this woman, of course, now we will consider that the spousal element will be the officer. So the officer will be, or here we have an officer. So there'll be one officer, seven killing. And of course, we'll then have another one, which is your direct officer. So it's a direct officer that will fight itself. Right. So this would indicate also that there are two. And of course, here we do see that the monkey will clash with the snake. So monkey has a clash with the snake. It has a combination, And of course, the tiger will also have a clash against the monkey. Yeah? Clash against the monkeys. All right, so between these two, once again, we would consider that. In a passage of time, it may. So, how do we interpret this? Again, the number may interpret that. So, in this person's life, they would very likely be two, two most significant spousal relationship. One when she met when she was young. Somehow, this relationship tends to face clashes and destruction. And the destruction, of course, is where the second spouse sits on the pillar with the snake destruct to the monkey. And then, of course, the tiger will clash with the monkey, so to speak. All right, so this would be how we can then read on the two charts as we go along to number one, to determine early marriage indicators, or we will consider delayed marriage indicators. So delayed marriage indicator would be when it appears in the hour pillar, or whether it's weak or white, or affiliate. Right. Uh, Now, of course, here we also want to consider that, sometimes there are people who would dream to have that fairy tale marriage. And so, in terms of parts, we'll consider that the special combinations that indicates marriage. Number one, we have what we call the Mandarin duck combination. So this Mandarin duck is just one of the idioms in Chinese to mean one of those love made in heaven kind of indication. So this love in heaven kind of indication would be the perfect match when you find the annual stem and branch form a perfect match with the day pillar, heaven and earth. Therefore, that would be when heaven and earth combines together. So if it's when heaven and earth combines together, unless it is clash, then we'll consider this to be the pillar that one may want to look for. One may. Okay, so what would be considered to be that Mandarin duck pillar for Tom Hanks? What is the element that combines with the Ting fire? Rainwater, isn't it? And what would combine with the what combines with red, isn't it? Therefore, the Mandarin pillar would be the runes. So therefore, this would be the Mandarin so-called pillar. This would be in all simplicity, that would be the heaven and earth, the heaven and earth combination, heaven and earth combination, but we can just call it the Mandarin duck, so-called combination, just when it comes to relationship, as it is. And so, in terms of date selection, if let's say this person with a chart, approach you and consider, okay, can you please select a date for the marriage? Now, again, we refer to uh, the opinion, of course, when we say date selection, we actually would mean that the date refers to the legal date. Therefore, the registration date for marriage, the one where the law, the society recognizes. Of course, in traditional culture, the the communal wedding where the large meal is served, the dinner, may be something that still hold cultural significance. Therefore, but that comes secondary. That comes secondary. Ideally nowadays, it may be possible for the two dates to coincide. Therefore, there'll be. If not, then we'll. Yeah, therefore there'll be registered. But of course, this may not. It may or may not perfectly fit to the wife, isn't it? No, or to the female. So for the female, what would be that Mandarin duck combination for her? What would be that Mandarin duck combination? What combines with pink? What combines with sin metal? Sin high. Okay, fantastic. Therefore, that would be it. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. But of course, here, can we see that high will have a clash against therefore have a clash against the hour? So naturally, indicating that the date wouldn't be a good date. So if that fails, then the female's date will not be followed. It will be the male's date that will follow. So therefore, we'll then follow the male's if there is no clash. But is there a clash? Is there a clash? Do we find there to be a clash? Yes, correct. It will also clash. Correct. Therefore, it will also clash with the hour. And therefore, both will also find a clash that comes in. Okay, so in that case, then this will not be, the dates. So if desirable, then that would be the best one. So this is what I call special combination. So if not, now move on to the second one. Then of course we may then move on to the peach blossom influence, or the peach blossom days. So you can right now just come across. Now another part is to also look into what we call the disease. So the disease of the medicine here again would be the unfavorable stars, the unfavorable stars for the person. So the unfavorable stars for the person, for the man, would be the friend star and the Rockwell star. So the friend star and the Rockwell stars will tend to overpower the spouse. So when we look at the male, then these two stars are not favorable. So they become unfavorable for it. So the friend star and the Rockwell stars will be unfavorable. And for the case of Tom Hanks, we do find that he has the friend. So in terms of unfavorable stars, we'll find that the unfavorable stars will feature here, being a Rockwell, and being a Ting Fai. Therefore, this would be considered to be the unfavorable, the unfavorable stars. So with the unfavorable stars surrounding the obstacle, so these are the obstacles to marriage. But the obstacle to marriage, uh, if encountered the medicine, which is of course the direct officer and the seven killing that controls the friend star Rockwell star, that counteract, and therefore here might indicate that there is that indicate that this may be overcome. And so for seven killing, when the seven killing is here, and direct officer would be here, that can also counteract, counter. So you can find seven killing, and the officer start to also counter. And of course, in terms of officer and luck, we also see that generally the officer luck will also be here. That can counter. Right. Now, anyway, we'll just go through very quickly what are the stars. What are the stars that tends to prevent? So these are considered to be one that prevent the marriage. Now, as you look into the lady, now you can come to the literature. For the lady, it will be the eating god and the hurting officer. The eating god and hurting officer hurts the officer, controls the officer, that overpowers the spousal. And so as you look into the eating god and hurting officer here, Where do we find that? In God? God? Okay, so for this will be where we find that the in God that comes in. In God that comes in. And hurting officer, eating God and hurting. And once again, we do see that for the medicine, then the well star, the one that produces the officer star, they are the one who would then become the medicine. Therefore, here we do have the wealth star. So, what would be the wealth star? The wealth star will be those that we might find to be so-called metal, the metal that to add metal into it. Okay, I know this is a bit more. I wouldn't know whether it's overwhelming or not, but we'll just try to map out the first. Okay, so here once again, we will consider that first, number one, we evaluate the spouse star and the palace. Number two, we then look into the disease and the medicine. And number three, now the activation for the spouse palace. So the activation for the spouse palace, where it says here that marriage is likely when the spouse palace is activated. So now we are referring to the spouse palace activated through a combination, clash, harm, or punishment. In the arriving luck pillar annual branch that comes in. Therefore, if there's a combination, clash, harm, and punishment that comes along to the luck pillar. And so that is considered to be the activation to the spouse. And so, if that's the case, then what would be the activation for Tom Hanks? So, as we look into the palace is the ox. So, what would be the activation for the ox? What would be the activation? Number one, we have the dog. The dog does come in to punish the ox. What combines the ox? The rat. What harms the ox? The horse. Therefore, we have the horse. Okay. All right. So generally here we'll consider some of the elements that can activate us. So therefore we can find that there's an activation. Now in another part, we also find that the activation can also be in a form where the goat actually does clash with ox. Therefore, we do find that there's a clash of the goat. The goat creates a clash. Right. Uh, so generally, when we read this, we may consider that this will be the first clash. So therefore, this the first punishment. So therefore, the first punishment comes in from the first. So therefore, this first. Of course, as we go through to the many decades, as we go through the many decades, sometimes when we refer to marriages, and of course nowadays, people marry at a far later stage. Maybe back in those early days, we may even look into the second pillar itself. But nowadays, we look into the third and fourth pillar for marriages. So may consider that this pillar would be more likely the pillar for the first encounter. Now, meeting a spouse is somewhat akin to a bus stop where the arrival of the spouse it goes into a cycle. So if you miss one, then another spouse will yet come along. It comes in. Right. Therefore, here we will consider to identify that to be the first. Now, when we look into the lady, then what will be the clash? Then what will be? So this will be the tiger. And so what will clash against the tiger? The monkey. So what will harm? The snake. Right. Therefore, as we wrap up, the snake, the clash, and therefore this may be the first clash. Therefore, we consider this to be the first. Consider this to be the first. That comes in, into it. All right. Therefore, the tiger combines with the pig, and of course, it will then harm by the snake. So the snake will create the harm. If there's any combinations of the pig, we'll then find it to be quite late, as it is. All right. Therefore, as we map it up into this part, then we'll consider where the first activation point. So the first activation point will come. So sometimes as we look into the activation point, we'll consider that might be sometimes the first point of encounter, the first encounter point between the two of them. All right. And now let's come into the last part. So the typical marriage indicators in annual, so the annual stem and branch forms a combination with a day pillar, or the annual star appears and combines or clashes with the day pillar. So either combines or clashes with the day pillar. So this is where sometimes clashes can be good. This is where clashes can be considered to be positive as well as combination. Now, of course, I'm sure all of us would know by now that not all marriages will be successful or happy, or it may be considered to be those that may be deemed to be inauspicious. And therefore, this is also considered a point where not all marriages may happen in the useful God year. And so, for those who marry in the years ruled by the unfavorable God, due to external pressure, may find that those marriages may not last for too long. Or may we consider multiple obstacles, diseases in the chart, and they are not resolved. That may also be yet another problem. All right. So now here we will try to test and see whether what we have done so far works or not, no? Or whether it has any manifestation to what we have covered. So we do consider that for Tom Hanks, what is known for his first relationship is where Tom Hanks married an actress in 1978. Therefore, there was the first marriage in 1978. And unfortunately, the marriage ends up in a divorce in 1987. So they had two children, a son and a daughter, and then it led to divorce. And later, of course, the ex-wife, died in 2002 from bone cancer. Therefore, that marks the first relationship. So 1978 to 1987. 1978. So 1978 will be in this relationship. 1978 to 1987. Therefore, that would be the point of the relationship where they do get married for almost about 7 to 8 years during this period. Therefore, Tom Hanks married when he was 22. Therefore, that was the first marriage, and it was quite early into married into the year. George, yeah, in that case, you were right. So, George, you asked the correct question, and yes, the first wife was exposed to illness. And in a way, the marriage took place in the year of the horse, in the year of the earth horse, no? In the year of the think. Therefore, that would be the first part, no? Looking. Okay, now next we move along to the second part. And in 1981, so in 1981, this is where, of course, at that time it was just an acquaintance. I'm not suggesting anything, that it was in 1981 that they met. Then, of course, they met again each other in 1985 in a movie together. And after the divorce, then he married in 1988. Married in 1980. Now, so here, once again, this marriage, of course, may indicate the wedding date or may indicate, but there are a few days here, not too sure, 1981 to 1984. And therefore, this is where, if you look into Tom Hanks in 1981 to 1988 to get married. And therefore, at the tail end of the luck cycle, met here into this relationship. And then, of course, reunite here, but then got married over to this period that comes into it. So over the period here, we will consider that Tom Hanks' second marriage would then be in the year of the dog, one that clashes against a spousal marriage. And therefore here, it has been known that they have been together all this while. Now, next, we take a look into Rita Wilson. So again, in Rita Wilson, they bump into each other in 1981 and then reunite in 1985, and then, of course, got married in the year of the dragon. Therefore, that would be looking into that relationship here. Now, let's take a look into the next case. Take a look into the next case. Into the next case, here we have Hugh Jackman. So for Hugh Jackman, we don't have the hour, but let's run through very quickly once again and then try to map out on Hugh Jackman's reading. So once again, we come to Hugh Jackman. So Hugh Jackman, we learn that it's a Yeatwood born in. Yeatwood born in the autumn month. Wood is white, but sitting on rabbit, it is rooted. And in terms of its spousal stars, we do see that the Yeatwood would find direct wealth, so therefore it would be Earth. And in terms of Earth, we have direct wealth and we have direct wealth. So therefore, the two direct wealth and protruded here would be three direct wealth. That would be the spousal stars. And of course, in the stars, this would be the indirect wealth that we may have. Okay, so therefore that would be considered to be. Now, what would clash against the rabbit? What may clash against the rabbit would be the rooster. What would harm? What would harm? What would bring harm to the so-called your rabbit would be the dragon. And therefore, this would be considered to be the karma, the punishment that we may find. And of course, there is a combination between the dog and the rabbit. Therefore, that will be the one. I consider that for the male, the sickness would then be the Rockwell. I may also consider that the friend star would be one as well. Sickness. Now, when we look into the rabbit and monkey underground bonding, what do you mean? Rabbit and monkey. All right. Oh, underground bonding between the two of them. Okay, fine, good. Okay, okay. The hidden star and the bonding. All right. And now, as we consider for the wife, so therefore we have Yeetwood. So the wife is a Yeetwood as well, lady. And for lady, we consider this would be Yeetwood born in winter, strong and rooted. And now both her useful gods are absent. So pink fire is absent, dog is also absent. Therefore, the earth is also absent, so to speak. Therefore, this would be quite a very serious question for her. And then, of course, now we consider that for the Yeetwood lady, we have direct officer. And therefore, for direct officer, what would be it? The direct officer star would be, does she have direct officer in her chart? None. And of course, here we also now consider that we will also look into the so-called the one that clashes. The one that clashes would be to the goat, find that the ox, find that the dragon comes into it. And then for the case of Deborah, then we may also look into the other aspects, such as the Rockwell star, that can also be negative, or the eating god or the hurting officer, that can also be the sickness. All right, so these are just to look into again some of the relationship. So what happens here is that we do not find that. So since for this particular chart there is no, we try to consider if there is any officer. Now, of course, it is very hard to consider that we don't have the hour pillar to be sure, but the officer is absent. The officer is absent. So if the officer is absent from the natal chart, then we would consider that the spouse would require some form of clash, some form of uh, some form of clash. So this lady would be harder to get married. So we'll just have to find what are the elements that can activate to find elements to activate the chart. So the one to activate the chart would be Earth. So the Earth would then clash against the goat. Clash against the goat. All right. Can also see that she has Fu Yin in her chart. Therefore, there is also Fu Yin in her chart. Now, would anybody want to guess her useful god? According to the schedule, two of the useful gods are absent. So she has two void gods. But having said that, all gods, all elements must be somewhat used. So then what would be useful for this particular element then? Why? Why do you say Ting is born in winter to bring warmth to the chart? Okay, you consider why winter to bring warmth to the chart. Friend, the friend star would be useful. Basically, she needs to be rooted, no? Needs to be rooted. Therefore, as it is. Okay, so in a way, we must always consider useful gods. In a chart that will be most useful, and consider that the useful god should not be combined away or to be clashed away. Therefore, you will find that will be the one to provide support. All right. So anyway, we'll take a look into. So maybe today is a bit too. Uh, I'm not too sure whether it's complex or not. We'll try to break it down. Therefore, let us look into the date. Number one is that they got married in 1996 in Melbourne, and she had two miscarriages, couldn't deliver, and they adopted two children. But somehow, of late, just about 2 years ago, in September 22, after having a long marriage, they have now announced that they have been separated. Separated. Okay, so the wedding in 1996. So as they look back into their part when they were in 1996. So just at the turn, just at the turn of 1996 is where they were married. Pink. Jenny, why do you say pink? Is it? But the rat does have a punishment against the rabbit, isn't it? So there's also the uncivilized punishment into it. Therefore, that will also be the case. Therefore, there will be for Hugh Jackman in the year 1996, 97 into that particular. And then for the case of Deborah in 1996, that would be for her also at the tail end, also at the tail end of Luck Pillar to 1997, as this. As you're moving on to next pillars between the rabbit or to the dragon. So maybe at the tail end of, I think when they got married at the end, the energy for the following luck pillar may have already commenced. That we look into the Terracotta 1996. Right. So in 2000 and so in September 2023, they announced that they have separated. So in 2023, so in 2023, that's where they announced their luck pillar in the Kueh Rabbit, no? In the year of the rabbit, in the luck pillar of the rabbit, no? Ting Fire, whereby it does have that so-called activation to the head of the rabbit that comes in. Therefore, it may appear that the rabbit would then be an unfavorable element to him. Especially also in the year 2023 would be Kueh Water, Kueh Water year. In the Kueh Water year of the rabbit, where rabbit is the spouse and Kueh Water is the white god, is the white god for Hugh Jackman, is Hugh Jackman. So Hugh Jackman should avoid, for him, Kueh Water would be highly unfavorable. And Kueh Water, water and wood normally forms an ungrateful punishment. Therefore, this may indicate a sense of betrayal, to the person. And for the wife, the year 2023, in the year of the Kueh Water, marks to the element of the rock valve. So therefore, that would be the rock valve element, an element rock valve to the day master, so to speak. And therefore, that may be looking into their relationship over these last 2.5 decades into it. All right. So now, as we look into the advanced reading, we'll compare both the charts together and to see whether there can be any alignment or any storytelling between how we put the two charts together, the husband and the wife, the man and the woman together, and to see how their journeys can coincide in their luck pillar and their arriving, to be able to consider and compare compatibility or otherwise. All right. So with this, we'll end up on the today's sharing. We'll keep this material for next week. And so next week, we'll then continue with looking into all the other additional materials that we can have on this particular treatise as well. Right. Okay. So if there's no question, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much. I will see you then next week. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you all. All right. Good night. Thank you.